You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. And we, of course, are reviewing another episode of The Bad Batch. And once again, this one does not fail to disappoint. Or actually, no, it doesn't fail to... It actually came out wrong. I really love this episode. So I don't want to give the wrong impression. Like, it's like, oh, wow, it was bad. He hated it or whatever. No. Nothing like that. I actually think that this was yet another continuation. And again, one of the things that we talk about every once in a while with this season in particular, but I think it was very noteworthy when it comes to this episode, is the pacing. The pacing has really been spot on these.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been really good. I mean, you know, it's right in the proper pocket or groove, if you will. You know, it's like it's not moving to like it's fleshing everything out in the right amount of time. So yeah, it's been a really good ride so far.
So far, David, of course, joins us. What's up, David? See, because this actually, it's funny because depending on what time we do this, it's almost like it determines who we get chatting. Like, there's a group that loves the whole Friday at 11 thing, but when we can't do it then, it's like we get a different set of people for Sunday at 3. Which, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because at times I think, yeah, you know, maybe this would actually be a good time to do it. But at the same time, then, you know, we have a show like 2 days in a row. So there is that. Let me see. I see we have another chat coming in. I'm just waiting for it to populate. There it goes. Sometimes it's slow. Ted Adam Green basically says, thoroughly enjoying this season so far still. And that's actually the remarkable thing, is the fact that we're still, you know, we're 12 episodes in. I mean, we're pretty much 3/4 of the way through this thing now. And it's still capturing our attention. There hasn't been anything even remotely where they're dropping the ball or anything like that. I mean, so far, you know, this season has been just incredible. I mean, you and I have talked about this several times where we've said, you know, this could actually be one of the best written Star Wars seasons of any of the shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just the writing of it, the story and the suspense, the characters developments that we've gotten, you know, in this particular season has been spot on. There's a lot of tension where it needs to, and I'm still like, you know, usually by now we know season is going. I still don't know.
I know.
Like, I mean, I still don't know what the end is going to be because, like, once again, this is still the final season of the show. So I don't know how this is really going to end. I mean, I know they're probably going to try to break Omega out. I don't know if that's when everybody's going to perish. I don't know if they're going to make it out. I don't know if we're going to find out truly what Necromancer is. You know what I mean? Like, there's still so many questions, and we only have 3 more left.
I know, and it's actually a very good point because a lot of times I think it's easy to forget that this is the last season. You know, that this is actually not just coming up on a season finale, but it's a series finale. And we know how the Clone Wars actually overlapped into episode 3. It almost makes you wonder, are they going to try to overlap this into, I don't know, Rogue One, episode 4? I mean, I've read, what was it that I read the other day? I read something that somebody is alive in the original trilogy. It was some sort of article that I was reading the other day about one of these characters. It might have actually been the entire Bad Batch. I don't remember. Well, you know, minus
it.
Yeah, exactly. Some like nothing character or whatever, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's actually surprising, and again, to be on the 12th episode and to still be holding your attention, and as you pointed out, because that's another good point, is to keep you guessing. Like you said, by now you usually know, okay, this is where the season's going. you don't necessarily know how they're going to get there, but, there's usually like a big standoff, or there's a big, some sort of a
Mhm.
huge mission that they have to accomplish, and, it becomes, are they going to leave it open-ended or not? Whereas this one, we really don't know what's going to happen, and we don't even know at what point this is going to end, which is a really difficult thing to do when you're running a series like this. And also to keep capturing your attention, you know, not to have any real filler episodes. I mean, the closest thing we got to a filler was episode 2. But of course, I'm sure we'll bring all this stuff up again when, after it's over, we do our whole season/series recap. But with this episode in particular, once again, one of the things that I think is really cool is how they continue to have this very sinister, dark vibe to each of these episodes. And the things that are dark are very appropriately dark. And then, of course, they do have lighthearted moments in there, too. But I think the Empire is really threatening again. And that's something that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, I think what we're really getting in this series, in totality, is the oppression part. That's why we're really getting a chance to feel that, is how oppressive that the Empire is across galaxy wide. I mean, we saw it in Rebels more or less, but Rebels was kind of in a way almost centered on Lothal
Yeah.
for the most part. I mean, they went different places, but in the Bad Batch, I mean, they're in like everywhere they go, they're with like the Empire and dealing with these big projects that the Empire has, what they're trying to do. I mean, we know there's like the formation of the Death Star. We know there's all these other different projects that are still, kind of building. So it's just been really um it's been really good storytelling, how they're showing how oppressed the empire is, and offering us a lot of canon and showing us the transition from clone troopers to the stormtrooper program. Like, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think they're getting into the details and the minutia of things, but they're also really giving you the show like the weight of the empire and how it's affecting everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, this episode is no different. Obviously, it starts out, uh, with a very sinister opening scene. I like the fact that they're now bringing Omega into showing her, hey, this is what the whole thing is, right? This is what's going on.
Hmm.
I'm glad that we're focused again on Dr. Carr, and we're, focused on Hemlock, and we're starting to be focused on more of what I consider the meat of the story. And that's not to say that that's not equally important when dealing with Crosshair and his relationship with Omega and all that stuff. I mean, I enjoyed that stuff too. And in fact, I've said I could actually see an entire series based on those two. I could see an entire series based on Cad Bane and his droid. I mean, there's a lot of little things when they brought Asajj back. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on that you might consider a somewhat of a detour from the main story that are equally compelling, but we are getting near the end here. So it is time to come back to that story. And I'll tell you, the thing that happened early on, and it set the tone of the episode for me, it was when, Omega was talking to Dr. Carr, and, Carr was basically like, well, I'm just glad, that you're safe or whatever. And Omega says, am I? I mean, that line just like,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
such
It's almost
that was a phenomenally written line, man.
It was, because it's like there was a hint of sarcasm, but then there's also like a hint of real, I guess, like almost like fear or
Yeah.
concern. Like,
Yeah.
am I really safe? Like, what are you guys doing? But then she's kind of being sarcastic, like, am I really? It's, you have a little bit of both of there. So I thought that was,
And that's what made that so cool. And it was such a phenomenal line, and it gave you a little bit of a chill too, because that's true. It's one of those things where you really don't know what's going to happen. You know that they're trying to collect her blood and all that because of the M count, and it mixes well with whatever they're doing, which of course we find out, as the episode closes. But the thing about it is, you really don't know what they're planning to do with her, though. This is one of those situations. Is it, we're going to keep you alive and consistently harvest your blood? Are we going to get everything that we need, and then when we're done, we're just going to execute you? You know what I mean? We don't really know the fate of what they're planning anyway to do with Omega.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Yeah, I mean, and that's a very valid point that, they could just keep her in this. They need her maybe on a continuous basis. Because it's like, you got that one, and you don't want something to happen where, like, dang, I wish we didn't offer her because we could use her again.
Right? Yeah.
It's kind of, so on one hand, you almost kind of want to keep that around just in case.
Oh, absolutely.
unless you just have her, it doesn't even matter. Then I'm sure.
Well, and you also have to look at it. You have to look at it from an in-universe perspective too, right? Because obviously they needed Grogu by the time after Return of the Jedi hit. So we don't know really if Omega is still around at this point, because it seems like, okay, it's either one of those things that, I don't know, it could go either way, right? So, in other words, they could have Omega and they just might want someone else. It's like, oh, well, this little creature's blood works too. Let's add it to the mix. Is it that Omega was killed? Or maybe, just not working anymore or whatever, and they need somebody more powerful, or, I mean, who knows?
Well, it could be that she escaped, or it may be another part of the compound, because you still got those 3 other kids in there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, okay, Omega is, so you almost have to wonder, are they trying to almost make some weird kind of cocktail almost?
Well,
like,
I think so, because and this sort of jumps ahead to the episode, and then, but of course it doesn't matter. It's just like a general discussion. We don't have to do this in a linear way, but at the end of the episode, that was the whole point, right? They extract her blood, they mix it with those 3 kids, and it does something.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we don't know what that's all about either.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I'm saying. That's my whole point. Like, I don't know where this is going. What I mean, in the sense of, like, sometimes they kind of foreshadow it, like, okay, we're trying to build this super thing, and they explain it, and then just our characters just don't know. But like, we're in the same spot as our character. None of us really know what the heck necromancer is, how it works, all the the different things that go into it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
Well, and that's a good point too, because usually they're going to do one of 2 things. They're usually setting something up for the next season, which we know we're not going to get.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that they set up now isn't going to be paid off until, I don't know, The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, any of the other existing series, maybe another project. Maybe they do a comic or something. We don't even know. Because one of the interesting things that I find is particularly about these last, I don't know, 4 episodes, 5 episodes maybe, is that the plots have not been very complex. And this one's really no exception. I mean, you essentially have a situation to where you have Omega finding out about, a little bit about at least, what they're trying to do with her, pretty much getting her acclimated to this new life that she has. And, of course, protecting her, getting the blood extracted, all that stuff. So that's one element of it. And then, of course, you have the clones, and they're trying to rescue her, trying to figure it out. Not just what all this M-count stuff is, but they're also trying to figure out, of course, where Tantus is, because they need to try to rescue her. And then, of course, along the way, they run into Rampart again. And then the whole idea is, Rampart, I mean, that whole mission to get him or whatever, it's almost like that quest-based thing, right? You get a piece of information that leads you to the next problem, and then you solve that, and then, you get closer. So it's not just like, okay, we're getting to Tantus. It's like, well, if you want to get to Tantus, you got to talk to this guy. And, And I mean, it just they always do that kind of a setup.
You
And
know,
what
it
I
kind of reminds me of that Frasier episode we always laugh at. You know, when he had the nick in the floor, he was like, "Oh, Frasier can't have
yes,
the party because you know." And then he just goes on this rampage of like this happened and that happened and this happened. And it's like eventually, like the problem keeps almost in some ways getting worse.
right.
But yeah, and I just think that the whole Rampart thing was cool, but what was even more telling was the whole Crosshair. The fact that you knew all this time, like I kind of he's kind of the last resort, and well, I guess now you know. I thought that was kind of a weird thing because I thought like, okay, are we about to have a whole nother dissension in the Bad Batch now? Because like, dude, you knew we could have went after this person a while ago and got information, but
Well, that's
you
another
kind
good
of held
point
out.
because there was definitely a thing to where I was curious. And remember when we talked about the last episode, I said, "Well, how are they going to handle the fact that Crosshair is the one that basically let Omega go?" I
Mhm.
mean, we were wondering, okay, is that going to spawn like a whole nother, okay, we hate Crosshair. What's your real motive? The whole distrust thing
Right.
again, those kinds of things. But actually, that went relatively smooth. I was really surprised that they resolved that. Well, okay, whatever. You had to do it or something. And then they're trying to figure out, well, do you know where it is? Now, I noticed that he didn't say, I tried to shoot a tracker and I missed.
Yeah.
You're just kind of like,
Well,
mm.
left that yeah, conveniently left that out. But the other thing too, though, is like, okay, one, yeah, Rampart, may know, but he was just like, in a rush to get back to 10. That was another thing he kind of, doing his thing with his hand. So it's almost kind of like too, where I'm kind of going along with you guys. I really didn't want to do this mission to be the only reason why I have to go to Tantus now is because of Omega. Really, that's the only reason why I want to go back. But quite frankly, like I didn't want to do this to begin with. So I thought that was a interesting story plot as well.
No, it was. And I mean, there was a lot of things that, even though these things are what I would call deceptively simple, I mean, if you pretty much just look at it from the outside, surface level, the plots of these episodes are fairly straightforward, fairly simple. You know, there's not a lot of complexity to them. But yet, there is if you just dig a little deeper and you think about it. And again,
Hmm.
I think that that's showing that this season is a lot more character driven than the previous ones. A lot more. The first season really was more about the world building of it, right? It was more about establishing this time period, a lot of the parameters, getting to know the clones a little bit and where they fit in this bigger universe. And as the seasons have gone on, in season 2, it gets a little bit more introspective and you're seeing the clones, but it's still kind of a balance. It's a little bit of character development plus what's going on around them, but still a big world, right? Sid's sending them all over the place. I mean, there's like a
Hmm.
lot that's there. Whereas this season, it's really only taking place in a couple of locations, mainly Pabu and Tantus, right? So
Yeah,
you pretty
yeah,
much have this whole character exploration thing going on, more so than we're going to send you on all these weird missions.
yeah. It's very streamlined now, and it's very, like look, this is the only mission almost. It's like there's no mission greater than this. This is the only thing we need to be concerned with. And so it allows them to because of that, I think it allows them to have that exploration more in the characters versus the worlds because you could do it somewhat if you were jumping all over this, but I think it makes more sense to do it this way because Pablo is like their refuge, like you said in the other episode. It's their safe space, it's their fortress of solitude in a way. So, and once that got invaded, it's just like, well, crap, Now what do you do?
Yeah, and the idea is that okay, it's like, look, now they have a reason to actually go. I mean, they wanted to. they had learned about Tantus, they had learned about some of this stuff, and they were thinking of trying to go there to maybe figure out what's going on. But now they got to rescue Omega. And what I really find interesting about the Rampart thing, of course, you have a little bit of that relationship between him and Crosshair, some of that. And what I found really interesting was when they captured him, he's bargaining with them. He's not really acting 100% like a prisoner. It's like he still obviously has a little bit of power over Crosshair in a way, or a little influence or something. Not in a nefarious, like, we're going to work together kind of way, but more like he can really hit his buttons, he can pretty
Yeah,
much.
he can nudge him.
Yeah, he can
get under his skin.
Get under his skin. He can pretty much prey upon his weaknesses and, self-doubts and stuff.
I think that's part of due to the hand thing, like his whole, he's like, oh, CT, 197 or whatever, like, and I think, I think it just brings back a trauma for Crosshair in a way. I think that's
Yes.
what it put it. It's like a mental trauma for him dealing with Ram. And I think that's one of the reasons why he didn't want to bring it up, was because dealing with Rampart ultimately leads them back to Tantus. And it's like, okay, like he said, he wasn't trying to go back. He had no desire of going back there, but because of Omega, it's like, okay, I have to. And now it's starting to, because we know there was that whole episode when he was doing yoga basically with Omega on Pabu, to try to cure his hand situation. Like, now you're putting me back in a situation where now I'm facing that trauma yet again.
Mm-hmm.
And, now it can be telling.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a guy who, comes back from a particular war or something, basically has complete PTSD, is trying to get over it, and then gets called back to go back in that very same location. It also reminds me of, I can't remember the characters' names, but in Game of Thrones, it was that one dude that was kind of like his slave the whole time. Like, he kept calling him, like, Fleek or something like that, or something, Freak or whatever. And it was like he was this once powerful guy, but, he ended up being conditioned until he was just a shell of who he once was. And when he saw that guy again, it sort of brought back some of those things. It was like you would think it'd be like, now I have the upper hand again. But nope, it's that dynamic that hits again. And it brings all that stuff back, and it shakes you up a little bit. And I think that that's what Crosshair is experiencing around him. Because normally, he would just, swipe the guy. Well, I mean, granted, they actually need the information out of him, so they're not going to do it. But I do think that it's intriguing that they still have a little bit of that dynamic from when Crosshair was imprisoned by him. And you're right, by calling him by his number like that, it triggers that. There's obviously a lot of trigger points that Rampart can explore with Crosshair and throw him off or weaken him or, whatever. And I think that that's something that I'm sure they're going to explore in the next episode, but we'll have to see.
Definitely. Especially when they have to get this information out of him. So,
right, and that's the thing. It's like obviously they're taking their time with that, because obviously, I mean, and look, it's not like this episode was completely devoid of any action. I mean, I think that, like, the whole scene with the transports on the bridge and, all that. I mean, that was some of the most exciting stuff that we've seen in the entire season. I mean, that whole battle scene, really.
Well, yeah, it kind of reminded me of so when they were on that train heist.
Yes.
That's what it kind of
there was a lot of there was a lot of that. And honestly, there was that point where, Wrecker was somewhat in danger. I was half wondering if they were going to kill him off.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that I also really enjoy about the show, because it's happened in all 3 seasons, but particularly this one. There's a couple of things you have to look at. One, you almost have to do the Rogue One kind of thing, where it's like, okay, look, that these guys have to die by the end of this, right? Because in in the case of Rogue One, it made no sense to have anybody alive for the original trilogy. So you knew they were going to be killed off. Now, what you didn't know was that they were going to just pretty much do most of it all at once in one big scene. But you were, in the back of your mind, you knew that these guys had to eventually go. And it feels like, okay, you know that Rex, canonically, they made that one dude with the beard in Return of the Jedi, they made him Rex. I mean, it wasn't Rex when they actually were, writing it or whatever, but they just kind of went, all right, well, he doesn't have an actual name, so let's just make him Rex, right? So they have explored the idea that some of the clones do actually make it through the original trilogy and beyond. But what I find fascinating is that the Bad Batch themselves, it may not make a whole lot of sense to have them alive unless, they're just chilling on Pabu and just said, you know what, we're done. We did our bit for king and country. That's it. So every single time one of these characters gets in danger, you start to think like, is this how this guy's going to meet his end? And then, they're just going to systematically kill them off. Because like you pointed out, we got 3 episodes left? I mean, it would not shock me. So I did briefly think that maybe Wrecker was going to meet his end, much the way Tech did.
Well, yeah, and it was funny. I mean, granted, I know it's I know it's just based upon storytelling, but it's just hilarious to me that since Tech has been gone, and so is Echo. Echo's not dead; he's just not with them. But they just been able to infiltrate everything else without having to, hide their, or mask, like, okay, well, we need to mask our signature, or we need to hack into this. And like, they've been able to get into these Imperial compounds that are super like guarded and protected, and without having Tech around. It's almost like, did you even really need Tech to begin with?
No, and I 100% agree. The only thing that I could say on the masking the signature part, there is somewhat of a in-universe, and not just like general, but I mean directly.
Well, there's a feature like in a lot of ships that can do that.
Well, and it's not even that. They don't have to mask their signature. You got to remember, the reason why they had to mask their signature before was because nobody really knew that they were around. Well, now everybody knows they're around. Like all the higher up Empire guys, like everybody knows the Bad Batch or Clone Force 99 is around. There's no real reason to have to mask your signature anymore. They're not really trying to hide like that. So
plus the Marauder is gone too. So, that was the ship that they had to mask.
Right.
So but now that ship has been blown to bits. It's
Yeah.
it's like a reset button.
Right. I mean, all bets are off at that point. But the other part of the point, though, does stand where, it's like, all right, man, you're able to crack into all this stuff that, like, which one of you can maybe make the argument, okay, Omega maybe picked up a thing or two from Tech or something, but
he did train her. I will say that. So we don't know to what extent, but she can't be him though.
I know.
Hunter probably would know some stuff too, because he's the leader. So sometimes he may need to know, just because, let's say the group had to separate for whatever reason. Like, okay, Wrecker and I will go over here. You and Crosshair go over here and take care of this. And well, if you run into a situation, you kind of need to know how to do some basic hacking, I guess.
Well, not only that, but you can also look at it from this standpoint. Maybe they could do it, they just couldn't do it as fast as Tech. Like, Tech could do it faster.
That's true.
Right? So it's not that they have a complete inability, it's just it's going to take them longer. And they have, to their credit, they have fit that in there. Like, it hasn't been that whole, like you're talking about, storytelling convenience, right? We're just going to write in that all of a sudden, well, Tech's gone, all right. Well, suddenly they all know how to do this stuff now. Or or maybe, I don't know, Tech left behind like a dummies guide or whatever. I mean, I don't really think that's the case, but
frequently asked questions.
Yes. And I mean, there's also been a lot of things too where they've been given a lot more access to stuff. They have some outside help. There's
Yeah,
been some
for sure.
characters that have returned that, when it seems like they're stuck. That's another matter of convenience too. Is that,
Hmm.
hey, they happen to be stuck on this one little thing, and guess what? A character who happens to be a genius at this suddenly shows up to help them. And
Hmm.
of course we can all say, well, the will of the force or whatever. But, I don't know. Dragonfly says hello everyone. What's going on? It's good to see you back.
Hey,
It's
hey.
funny, we got like a little group of our people here today. On a Sunday. Who knows? Maybe this is the best day. But yeah, I thought that part was really interesting. The whole dynamic between Rampart, and he knows that Crosshair's the one that he can get to. And so he's the one that he's going to continually try to exploit. So if I were Hunter, I honestly would limit the interaction between those
Sure.
two
Absolutely.
and just have him and Wrecker deal with them.
Yeah, especially Record, because Record just doesn't care.
Yeah, right. But then again, you would still need somebody that's actually smart enough to do the
Yeah.
interrogation. But if you just left him alone in a room with Wrecker, I'm
Well,
sure he
you
would
just
be.
have Hunter. Hunter would ask the questions. Record would just handle the punishment.
Yes, yes. All the wrong answer things.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, Another thing that I thought was cool, which of course happens a little bit later on, and you can tell, is the fact that Dr. Carr definitely hates the fact that she has to do what it is that she's doing. It's like she's
Yeah.
towing the line for the Imperials still, but now that she has a little bit of glimpse, because remember, we had that whole episode where she saw how the kids were being mistreated. And the idea behind that was that the clones, yeah, look, they were basically created for this. She didn't really have any sympathy for them because it's basically part of their job description. But when it came to the kids, and they were these innocent, scared little kids, that was when
Yeah.
she started going, this is not cool. And I really thought that now that you see, because if you juxtapose her attitude in this episode from, say, the first episode of the season, you see a complete difference.
Yeah. I mean, well, Dr. Carr, and once again, you see the growth in her mannerisms a lot, just because she's very kind of clinical and just very sterile as far as like
Right.
personality wise. And then now in this, she's having more interaction. She's talking, to her subjects more. And but she's also asking questions, and she's seeing like, okay, you know, what are we really doing here? And
Exactly.
you could see is making her uncomfortable. And I think, yeah, it's a soft spot for her when you got, and I think that's with anybody too. And once again, that's what I mean when it shows the oppression of the empires, because, you know, let's just face it, even in today's society, everybody has sympathy for like kids and animals, right? So like, you can see like John Wick can like take out like 60 guys in a room with like 30 bullets somehow. And everybody's like, yeah, someone kills his dog. Everybody's just like crying and upset. And, that's just, you know what I mean? This is how it is, right? When his dog died, everybody was just like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, they're mortified. And like, meanwhile, like, blasting people at point blank range, and everybody's like, yeah, but once again, kids and animals are really sensitive to people. So when you see when the empire is using children and they're like imprisoned and they're doing tests on them, against their will, and won't let them go home, and you've seen the peril that the kids are in when they're crying and they're sad, and they just feel so like you feel so bad for them.
Right, because
And I
they don't
think that's what
understand what's happening.
don't even understand what's happening, and they have no say in the matter, and there's no one to speak up or fight for them. And that's what all of us as fans or viewers really want to do, is we want to fight for the kids. Like, man, like, how do we get in? And I think that's what we see in Dr. Carr. We put ourselves in Dr. Carr's shoes. Like, man, if I were in the position that she was in, like, I wouldn't know what to do, because it's like, granted, I don't want to be killed, but at the same time, like, these poor kids don't even have, they don't have a fighting chance in this thing, really. So I really the growth that they're showing with her, and then she has that kind of bond with him. Hey, what's going on? Like, what are you? And she's just like, look, I really don't want. I just want to do my job and get out here and let's contact with you guys as much as possible. How she feels.
Yeah.
I really like that.
No, that's actually a phenomenal thing because, again, it's not just showing growth of the character, it's showing when you're giving these characters more of the variables, because that's how the Empire works. One of the ways that they had humanized the Empire in things like Lost Stars and stuff like that is, to most of the people who are in the Empire, they're not really privy to all these nefarious plans that Palpatine and Vader and all those guys are doing. Right? To them, half of them, it's just like a job. Maybe they work in the shipyard or something, and they're just, repairing TIE fighters or something. It's not like they're enslaving people or torturing anybody. They're just, or a lot of times I think people forget that, again, and we've said this multiple times during this show in particular, is that the Empire really is the Republic. It was the Republic. They kind of turned into the Empire, but it's basically the same players, and it's the legitimate government. So to a lot of these people, the rebels are terrorists, and they don't understand all of the variables. And so you get somebody like Dr. Carr, and Dr. Carr thinks that she's on the right side, and that what they're doing is good, and maybe it's advancing science in some way or whatever the case may be. But see, now she's getting more of the variables. She's getting more of the information. It's kind of like, oh, well, these guys are psychos. Now, the question is going to be, what is she going to do with it?
Well, yeah. But I think you hit the nail right on the head, Eric. When you brought up the fact that, like, when you have all the information and the Empire is smart and they're wise to do, is that they find like these bright minds, right? And they basically manipulate them to think that they're advancing something. Like, hey, because they did the same thing with Sabine when she created that weapon to destroy Mandalorian armor. Like, oh yeah, let's see how good you really are. And they were just angry. They knew she was angry at all this stuff, her own clan, and they were like, well, yeah, you're this marvelous weapons expert. I bet you can't come up. Oh yeah, well yeah, all I have to do is this. Well, can you? Is that even possible? Sure, if I had the right tools. Here, let's see. And now it's like, okay, unbeknownst to her, like, yeah, we got her to build this super weapon for us that would destroy her people, unbeknownst to her. And she's just like, I thought I was just doing something, cool. And same thing with a lot of the medical people. Like, they're like, oh yeah, we're advancing science. Like, yeah, can you think you can make this? Well, and that's what happens with people like that. You give them a certain problem, even people like us in our industry. You give us a tech problem and it's like, well, think your way around it. Well, that's intriguing for us. Now we have to think like, well, I guess we could hook it up this way, and if we have this, yeah, you can make that work if you did it this way. Like, that's those types of things intrigue certain type of minds, and the Empire knows that, and they use that to their advantage. And I think that's so brilliant, but also so diabolical at the same time.
Well, then there's a couple of things they do, because that's one tactic. But then the other tactic that they do, like in the Death Star, you get everybody working on a little piece of it. So nobody really knows what the actual thing is.
Yeah.
They're just working on their little thing, and it's like, in and of itself, it seems pretty innocuous. It's just like, okay, well, this is not really doing anything. And then all of a sudden you
combine all this stuff
and it's a planet killer, and you're like, whoa. That's why Galen Erso was just like, yeah, all right, guys, I'm gonna have to try to build in a weakness here, because I did not know this is what I was doing, and that's another thing that they do.
Good.
And
very good point.
I have a feeling, to a degree, they're doing that with Necromancer, but I think it's a combination of the two, because, again, You're only having certain people read in, and you're only reading them in so far. Because what they want is they want to avoid the possibility of a violation of conscience, and suddenly somebody like a Nalase or, Dr. Carr or whatever is all of a sudden objects, and it's like, well, we can't have them object because there's only a handful of people that could pull this off. So you have to keep them in the dark.
Yeah, you only have a certain amount of people who can pull it off, but the other thing is, it's like, found out, and they're not in agreement with what you're trying to do with it. Then it's even more, because now this person has the full picture, and you can tell them, like, you can start spreading propaganda. Oh, the empire is trying to do this. They're trying to, enslave everybody, or they're trying to do this. And I know because I worked on this project, and now you have some sort of credibility. It's like, yeah, well, I didn't know this is what we were doing, but then I kind of stumbled upon it. I'm like, oh crap, you guys are using this to, destroy a whole planet. I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to make like an energy efficient, device by using kyber crystals instead of using natural gases or resources. And a kyber crystal can power something for millennia or something like that without having to replace it. Yeah, I'm just looking as an energy conservationist. Yeah, that works. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know weaponizing this thing.
Well, and that's it. I mean, even in our own world, right? You basically have scientists that are creating stuff. The military is like, well, that's kind of cool. How can we weaponize this? And that's pretty much what you have to have. And then you have to be careful because, yeah, there's certain things that probably shouldn't be weaponized. It's a little too dangerous. And that's infinitely the case in the Star Wars universe. And I think that it's nice that you do have stories like that. Now, again, the bulk of the Rogue One story was in Catalyst, which was a novel. That was a prequel. That's where you really got most of the crux of the, that whole science versus military debate. You get it a little bit by giving Galen Erso's backstory and what he was trying to do and everything else in Rogue One, but for the most part, it was in Catalyst. And I would like to see more of that kind of thing in your animated shows or the live action shows or the films. Films might, unless you were to do kind of like the Star Wars version of Oppenheimer, you probably can't necessarily like make an entire film about it or maybe feature heavily unless you're weighting the plot to be a little bit more like that. But you can actually explore those themes, certainly in the Disney Plus shows. And I like the fact that in this episode, they are going down that hole, and they are showing that the more, like a Dr. Carr, the more information that she gets, the more she's starting to question things, and the more she's starting to think, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing anymore. And so I think that whole thing is going to be fascinating to see where this goes. Again, framing around the fact that we only have 3 episodes left after this. Is she gonna like do a whole like, okay, I'm going to be a traitor, or am I gonna try to do it covertly, like maybe I give Omega a few codes or something, but I cover my tracks and I don't let her know it was me, but I'm sort of like protecting herself, but while doing the right thing, that kind of deal. It's going to be really interesting to where they go from here because they're making a concerted effort to show us Dr. Carr's conflict in all of this.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's by accident.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. And that's the thing. That's what I'm looking forward to the most, is the what eventually happens, like you said earlier, Eric, what is she going to do with it? And then of course you still have the Bad Batch who still have to try to reach her. And fortunately, Omega has already apprised the Bad Batch to who Dr. Carr is.
Right.
So it's like if they run into her, she's like, well, yeah, I'm Emery Carr. And they're like, oh, wait, yeah, you're the one Omega was telling us about. Okay.
Don't care.
We don't have to kill you. Yeah. I don't have to kill you then.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I think that's I think that's all going to come to a head, man, and it's really going to just be interesting. I wonder if Phoenix Shannon and Asajj are going to team up and come
I
help
know.
them. You
Well,
know,
I
like
think that
keep wondering about that too.
that's going to have to be the case. First of all, they implied the fact that Asajj knows, or at least is aware. I mean, she's aware of Tantus. She's aware of some of the stuff. Obviously, her powers are unique that will come in real handy in this situation. You got to wonder how all that's going to go, though, because as I pointed out in the episode that featured Asajj, and we speculated on, well, I wonder if they're going to call her in later. It's like, well, by herself, she could go in and wipe all these people out.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost like maybe that's like an overpowering thing. I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, I
Yeah, almost
don't
like the
know.
Superman thing. Like Superman
Yeah,
can just
it's
walk into
like,
place and just decimate everyone.
see, right now, Asajj was the key to Omega's growth, and she provided a little piece of the puzzle, very much the same way Ahsoka did for Din in dealing with Grogu. It wasn't like she
Right.
came in and said, okay, I'm going to train him. She's like, well, I could give you his name, and I could put you on the right path, and I can fill in some of the blanks for you, but this is your journey. And that could be Asajj's whole thing, is maybe she's there to guide Omega a little bit, provide some key pieces of information, but it's still the clones battle. But who knows, you know? And again, I mean, this whole episode ends basically with Omega being locked in the vault with the other kids, which again marries the whole Omega story now with the kids, because remember that whole kids storyline was pretty much independent. It was just her and Dr. Carr, or them and Dr. Carr. As what was that main little girl's name? The one kid. Because there were three of them.
You said to me?
The little
there's
kid.
one that's
It's like
a Rhodian.
Yeah.
There's one that looks like Saisi 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the boy who
He was the one that always got into trouble.
One who was trying to break out.
Yeah, the one that was trying to break out. Like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
Thank you for your hospitality, but we're just going to have to agree to disagree, and I'm going to have to leave. And of course, that didn't go well for him. But
All right.
it's interesting because, first of all, there's a couple of different things that you got to look at. Number one, apparently Omega's blood and the whatever they're extracting, maybe it's the midi-chlorians themselves, I'm not sure yet. But whatever they're doing, and they're mixing that with the kids' blood, which, if you think about it, you know, Star Wars is moving into a little bit of a macabre little direction here with this. You know, it's going in a little bit of a dark direction. You know, we're mixing blood now, we're doing all kinds of weird things, but we don't really know yet what that's doing.
Well, Palpatine was always into alchemy and all this weird type of science.
Sure.
I mean, we've seen it before, you know, he's, you know, his little bowl and he looked like, you know, he's got this blue flame coming out of it and he's reaching in through the world between worlds and chasing out, you know, I mean, Palpatine's into some, you know, different type of stuff. And that's why even in the very beginning of this season, when he was just like, you know, some would say, you know, the things that we're doing is an abomination, you know. So, I mean, it's not like it's not without warning.
No, and saying. I mean, and again, you know, of course you could go to the whole, you know, the dark side as that's, I can't remember the line.
It's pathway that leads.
Yeah, that leads some would be unnatural. I'm botching up the line right now, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. And there's that. Of course, look, the expanded universe with the Dathomir witches, they pretty much introduced magic and all that kinds of stuff into the Star Wars universe. So there's not, I mean, again, it's not without precedent. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it wasn't where I would expect the Bad Batch to go. Let's put it that way. This series, I thought was going to be a little bit more, honestly, I thought it was going to be a little bit more about the stormtroopers coming in and phasing out the clones. And the Bad Batch being these outliers as the seasons progress. It's sort of like, how did they deal with that? But I'm pleasantly surprised that it's going in this direction because, you know, it's a really interesting direction.
Well, I think, like I said, I think I like the fact that they're covering all the bases. And what I can even though we haven't seen the end of the season or the series, to your point, from what we can see, like, okay, when we first started off, like, I don't think either one of us saw one this story going this route. First of all,
Mm, not even from last
however,
season.
well, no, I'm just talking about just overall, like the Bad Batch. When they announced the bad, like we had no idea that this is how the story was, well, what the story was going to. But what I can say is that they have covered most of the transition of the Empire in a very cool and unique way
Oh yeah.
through these events. You've seen, like, okay, we saw Kanan, okay, his master died, Depa, and then we're also seeing, okay, the formation of the clone, not the clone troopers, the stormtroopers getting are starting to come in, and they're phasing out the clones. We're seeing some different things that Palpatine, like what his plan as far as necromancer, and trying to preserve his life and essence, and kind of what he has kind of cooking up in the background. Um, Things even with Saw Gerrera, as far as being a freedom fighter and trying to deal with a lot of stuff. So we're seeing a lot of um, transitions that fill in a lot of gaps, and that's the thing. That's a cool thing about a series like this. Like, we got that, like, in Rebels, we got that in Clone Wars, and that's those things you can't get, like, in a Rogue excuse me, in a Rogue One. You could do it a little bit, of course. We got that in Rogue One, but you're still confined to, what, 2.5 hours. So it's only so much story you can tell. But with it's like this over multiples, you have, like, okay, 10 episodes in episodes in a season for 3 seasons. You can cover a lot of ground. They've done it in a very masterful way, overall so far.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's not, even though it's not the direction that we anticipated, it's a cool direction. That what I really love about it is the fact that more and more, and you're seeing this with more of the current projects, they're starting to try to tie them to all the other projects. They're not living in
Hmm.
their own little bubble anymore, going, okay, this takes place during this time, but it's never referenced or anything like that. They're really doing a lot to tie all the canon together between any of the TV shows, whether they're animated or live action. We assume the films, I mean, the way the films are going, it's looking like they're going to do the same thing, particularly with this Mandalorian and Grogu film that they're talking about. The
Hmm.
books, the comics, they're referencing them. They're continuing with some of the plot points, so there's a big continuity push. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that I think are, well, I guess for lack of a better term, beneficial for the entire franchise, because that's something that we've always wanted to see. And again, this sort of ties into the whole what we would like to see in the next episode, because we always do that
Hmm.
towards the end of the show. And really, usually we almost always give like 3 things, but I really only have 2 things that I would really like to see for the next episode. And again, we're coming up on the end, so I I could see it spilling into maybe the next 2 or even all the next 3. Well, one is I want to see more of Omega and Tantus, particularly her being in the vault now, how she interacts with the kids. Does she
Yeah.
explain anything to them? The whole Dr. Carr dynamic with now Omega and the kids in the vault. I mean, that's going to be, to me, a key thing that's going to have to come into the next episode. They don't have to resolve it. They just have to start dealing with it. And then, of course, the only other thing is Rampart, because his motives are a little vague. I'm wondering, is it like we said, that he's just, turning the knife, triggering Crosshair, playing with him, toying with him? Or is he going to become like another Callus, where he ends up turning into a good guy for some reason? He's Fulcrum, that kind of thing. Are they going to do something like, maybe it's not that dramatic, but maybe Rampart realizes, much like Crosshair did, that the Empire really isn't, they don't care about you. You go, then you're replaced.
I think I'm gonna. So I'm with you on the first part. I'm totally with you on that. I wouldn't change a thing. On the second part with Rampart, I think the only thing I would say is that I think he's probably going to be in the middle. I don't think he's going to go as far as being a next Agent Callus, but I don't think he's specifically going to use, just try to screw across here. I think he's screwing across, get him to a point where he can just float away almost with the rest of the garbage. That's a word. However, I think that he's going to, he probably already has started to realize that, okay, probably doesn't give a crap about you. Things I love about it is like he was a ranking officer and even know where Tanta was. There's like, you know what? No, it's where it is. It's just like, like you get on this ship and it just takes you there.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
you have it's kind of a they talked about this and I think they may have borrowed this from I was watching the History Channel one day and they were talking about Area 51. And of course, everybody knows like Area 51 is like off in Nevada somewhere. And a lot of people know where Area 51 is. But there's actually a second site that's like miles on that. That's almost like the real Area 51. Well, when you fly in, the windows are all like blacked out. So you can't see where when you take the bus to go to the Area 51, it's blocked out. And it's like, so no one outside of the driver knows exactly where it is. And it's like use like the same couple of people that only take people to and from Tantus the same way. And so that's why I think that it seems like they kind of borrowed that, and I like that aspect of it, that like even high ranking people, everybody doesn't know where where the coordinates is because it's that heavily guarded.
Yeah,
To
it's
the
a need to
point where
know.
the emperor is like, yeah, it's a need to know basis, and the emperor is very particular about that. So that also
Absolutely.
makes me wonder: is it going to, are they going to foil Tensis? Are they going to blow it up? And how's that going to screw with the emperor too? Like, is the emperor going to come back like son of a like I did all this prep work to make sure no one found this stupid,
Right. And then it ends with, well, at least I got the Death Star. That'll be fine. That'll last for a while.
Exactly. Yeah.
At least I don't have to worry about that getting messed up, right?
Right. Then a bunch of teenagers.
Dragonfly says, Omega is really good at bringing out the good in people and giving them confidence. I see her leading the other kids in a riot. I don't know about a riot. But I do agree that, yes, she'll be instrumental in, one, calming them down, maybe helping them to see, what's going on. And, you never know, because that one kid wants to get out of there. I mean, he tried to escape, twice in that one episode? So she'll have no problem selling him on that. Unless, of course, because they did punish him. He might be, he's been reconditioned. He might be like, you know what? No, tried that. Don't do it. But again, but it could mirror the fact, though, because remember, Crosshair tried to escape, paid dearly for it, but then Omega came up with a plan and it worked.
Yeah,
so, there could also be that. So, I mean, we'll have to see. But I don't know. I think that moving forward now, they're really going to have to start to tie up this whole storyline in such a way where, again, I don't know if they're going to destroy Tantus. I don't know if it's going to continue to be the facility where they do things like Project Necromancer or any of the other projects that, it's like you said, I mean, if you've read the expanded universe, even the new canon, I mean, there's always some project. Geez, in Rogue One, you had that whole, when they were finding Project Stardust, there was that whole, library of different projects that they were going through. So it is conceivable that they could keep it around. And I think that maybe it would be a little less cliched to not destroy it. It's because you see that all the time. It's like, oh, they're doing this really weird thing. We'll destroy the base. Maybe you don't destroy it this time. Maybe you just escape it. Or maybe you cause damage to it, but it doesn't totally destroy it or whatever. And again, It's like you said at the beginning of our show today. You don't really know what the end game with this thing is. We don't know where this is going.
Yeah.
Like, how do you tie this up?
Man, it's so much. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well,
left.
yeah, we have a few episodes left, so let us know what you guys think of this one, and what was your favorite scene in this episode. We'll keep it real simple for this week. I did put up a poll. I should actually pull that up right now. Put up a poll a couple of days ago. Because you know me, I like to do these. It also is a good way to keep us all engaged. So basically, this one was, do you like the direction of the Bad Batch Season 3 so far? And it's really interesting because most people, 67% of you said yes, it's what Star Wars should be. But it's split 17% each on no, it's just another Disney flop, which that really surprises me. I'd love to know which one of you guys voted that one, because I mean, I could not disagree on that one more. And then, of course, there's a few who said not sure, have to wait and see. So I'm really curious on the same thing, because I'm like you in that sense of I am totally sold on the season. I think it's great. I think it's phenomenal. I think it's one of the best that has been in recent Star Wars, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I am wondering where it's going. And I'll say this. If they screw it up, it could actually ruin the entire season.
Well, I don't think you will build to this point and then screw up the end.
I hope not.
I'm it's not impossible.
Well, let me clarify this though, because there is a difference. There's actually screwing it up, and then there's maybe coming up with one you don't like. They can be different. Like,
yeah, okay.
I could actually see them coming up with an ending that I'm not 100% in love with, but it's still maintaining the quality, the writing, all that stuff. I just didn't like it. So there is a... Okay. And I can't say that it would actually ruin it for me if I didn't like it. If I didn't like it, I could be disappointed, and I would say, well, all right, it was a phenomenal season. I just didn't like the ending. But
yeah,
I don't think they're going to mess it up either.
Yeah.
I mean, they're 12 episodes in. 12 episodes in, and to me, they've been knocking it out of the park. The closest they had to a filler episode was episode 2, and that was episode 2. You know, it's not like they've had a few, or, you know, it was a few episodes ago. I mean, we've been getting consistently really good, character-driven, well-written, well-executed, well-paced episodes. So let us know what you guys think. Tomorrow. Do we have a topic for tomorrow yet? I don't remember. I don't think we do.
I don't think so. But...
No, I don't either. I think we're going to have to come up with one. But we know what we're talking about next week. So next Friday, hopefully, at 11. We say this all the time, yet here we are on Sunday afternoon. But our intention is next Friday at 11, we will be reviewing episode 13 of The Bad Batch. So thanks, guys, for joining us as always. Thanks to everybody who chatted in. As usual, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It does help the algorithm, and it helps us to get in front of more people like you. So help us out. In the meantime, I'm Eric Vansel.
Hero Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.